Out of Order Podcast, Episode 3.
Welcome to the Out of Order Podcast, your window into the firearms community, exploring those shaping the future of our rights and protecting our lifestyle, laws, legal cases, activism, and self-defense in a candid and honest podcast for our brothers and sisters in arms. Here's your host, James Kalita.
Welcome, Out of Order listeners, to Episode 3. Today's sponsors are Liberty Maniacs, where you can get the shirt that defeated the NSA, and Liberty Classroom, where you can get the history and economics lessons they didn't teach you in high school. Today's guest is Paul Lathrop. He is a co-host at the Polite Society podcast, the founder of the Self-Defense Radio Network, and an organizer of the ANCOM Gun Rights Media Convention. And now, here's Paul.
Well, hey, thanks for having me, man. I'm honored to be a guest.
Thank you. So, you started Polite Society podcast, I think you said in 2012. What was the...
The reason I started this show, I started listening to podcasts. I'm an over-the-road truck driver, had satellite radio, and I got hooked on this show called Tom Gresham's Gun Talk Radio. And after a while, the satellite radio became repetitive and boring, and I was paying. And I remembered that Tom Gresham had this guy, Ken Blanchard, on that was on something called a podcast. I thought, well, heck, I'll see if I can look that up. And Gresham said that his show was on a podcast. So I downloaded some podcasting software, and through Ken Blanchard, I found these guys called the Gun Dudes. And I really liked their show. And then through them, I found this guy called, the unnamed trucker at the time. I didn't know at the time his name was Chaz Murray. But I really got into his show, and I got to thinking, if this guy Murray can do it and be successful at it, I've got a different take to him, but I bet you I could do it. And this jerk in the White House, we got to get rid of him. And so if I put my podcast out there, put my reasoned opinions out there, there's no way America's going to elect Obama to a second term with me putting my voice out there. And, of course, we all know how well that worked. But that's why it started, is because I was listening to podcasts. I thought I had the brain and the opinion to do it. I thought people might like listening to what I had to say. And I just kind of struck out and did it. Originally, it was me, myself, and I. And I put shows out 3 times a week, and it grew from there.
So were you always, or how did that come about?
I miss you. You're breaking up. I missed that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Have you always been into firearms, or was that more?
Well,
how did that come about?
I grew up around firearms. I grew up in a acreage. We call it a farm, but it's more of an acreage. My father owns 30 acres in rural South Dakota, and I grew up around him. It was no big deal. I became an adult, and it wasn't a central part of my life until September 11th, 2001. September 11th, 2001, when we had the World Trade Center attacks. And I had my family at home, and I got to thinking, if something were to happen here, what am I going to use? Harsh words? It just didn't make sense that I wasn't able to protect my family. That's when I started getting into firearms as an adult. And then out of that grew, terrorism, but it's a whole lot more common for some druggie to be beating on my door and trying to break in to steal stuff. And that's where self-defense came into it. And that's really where my focus has been over the last 7-8 years, is self-defense and advocacy for Second Amendment rights, of course. But I've always one of my favorite gifts I ever got as a kid was a BB gun, a BB gun and pellet rifle. It was a Daisy. Loved that gun and shot thousands and thousands and thousands of BBs out of it. So from 6 years old, I've been around shooting.
Wow. So you felt the effects of all the way in South Dakota, and it's sort of ironic that you experienced and decided to get into self-defense, and yet on the East Coast where it was closer, they or at least a lot of them, I know there's a lot on the East Coast, but they kind of went the other way. They kind of went the way of gun control and disarmament, and it's a interesting.
Well, look where the attacks happened. The attacks happened where everybody was disarmed. It could have been the attacks happened and the planes took off out of Boston. Now, it could have been any airport in the United States because all airports were disarmament zones at the time. So it could have been any airport in the United States, but it was on airplanes where weapons are not allowed. And look at that terrorist attack again. The one plane, three planes successfully hit targets. The fourth plane, because of timing, was still in the air, and people started getting word that, hey, this ain't going to happen the way you think it's going to happen. They may say they're taking you to an airport to negotiate. That's not what's going to happen. And when people fought back, that ended that attack. And it was the last time an airplane was used. It's a one-trick pony. If an airplane were to get hijacked now, instantly people are going to be fighting back. And unless you've got 52 terrorists and 20 regular people on the plane, it's never going to work again. As long as regular people outnumber terrorists, they'll never use another jumbo jet as a weapon again. Which is why disarmament on planes makes absolutely no sense anymore. Because they're useless as a weapon against us.
Right. Yeah. So you started the Polite Society podcast, and how did you find a self-defense radio network, or found that, or how did that come about?
Well, when I very first started the Polite Society podcast, that was not the original name. The original name was Politics and Guns. And the Gun Dudes and Chaz Murray, the Road Gunner podcasts, were on the Gun Rights Radio Network. And I thought, that's cool. If I could only get on the Gun Rights Radio Network, I could associate with shows like that. And my little tiny show. And by the way, my first episode in the first week, I had 6 whole downloads. But if I could get on this my little tiny show on this really cool network, then I could get some more listeners. So I did. I got on this network, and I got more listeners, and that was cool. And then Mark Vanderberg, the guy who owned and ran the Gun Rights Radio Network, decided that, well, he had done enough, and he was going to shut the network down. And things just kind of, the show cruised along. We did okay. There was other networks that popped up, and people thought, well, we're going to, try to replicate Gun Rights Radio Network. And I was on a couple different networks, and things just, nobody was there to run the network. Everybody just wanted to start a network, and hopefully everything worked out okay without them putting a whole lot of effort into it, and the networks withered and died. Well, I had the idea that we could replicate this, but it's going to take some effort. And so Bob Main, who is the Handgun World podcast, and I got our heads together, and we decided to start the Self-Defense Radio Network with the idea that if we actually put effort into the network and tried to grow the network, that it could flourish and we could bring in the type of shows that people wanted to listen to, and we could benefit from shows self-promoting and from shows helping other shows. And that was a year and a half ago, and Bob has since gone on to do his own thing, but I've kept the Self-Defense Radio Network, and the network is growing leaps and bounds. We've got, I want to say at last check, we had 15 shows on the network. We're growing all the time, and it's a bunch of great shows. I can't pull them all off the top of my tongue, and I don't want to start because it would be unfair to some of the great shows on the network if I don't remember them.
Sure, yeah, and I was really are a lot of really great podcasts on there.
Yeah, I've got it pulled up now. I mean, besides ours, of course, Polite Society's on there, but we've got Geeks, Gadgets, and Guns, Gun Freedom Radio, Armed Lutheran Radio, Firearms Chat, Self-Defense, Gun Stories, Modern Self-Protection, Eye on the Target Radio, the Remzo Republic, American Guns, Mac Outdoors with Mia and Leah, Riding Shotgun with Charlie just joined us. We've got a whole bunch of other new shows that just joined us. Survival and Basic Badassery, Mind for Survival, Tactical Pay, and Reloading Rag Chew. Also, those last four I've joined within the last about month. And it's just, we continue to grow because we have people that continue to put effort into it. I've reached out to some podcasters and let them know that, hey, I'm willing to turn over partial control of the network if you guys want to put the effort into it. And so we created a board, and Rob Morse of Self-Defense Gun Stories and Amanda Suffolcool of Eye on the Target, and of course Lloyd Bailey of Armed Lutheran have started running the day-to-day stuff of the network, and we're just really, really growing. That, as a matter of fact, about the same time we came up with the network, then we started this idea with the Second Amendment Foundation about AMCON, and Self-Defense Radio Network promoted AMCON last year, and I was going to be again this year.
Yeah. So how was the first year? I was looking at that, and I guess for the people, I guess from what I saw, it's a social media, I suppose, marketing for gun rights media. Paraphrases that, right? But you'll probably have a better description.
What AMCON is really, AMCON is, I don't want to say Media 101. It's maybe Media 201. It's Second Amendment media helping to make Second Amendment media better. It all came off. Gail Pepin had the idea originally. Gail is, of course, the main person behind the Pro Arms podcast with Masada Yub and a whole bunch of other gun people. But she had the idea. She went to a podcast festival in Florida. It was like $400 to get in. There was really great information, but when she mentioned that she had the Pro Arms podcast and that they were, they encouraged private ownership of firearms and they were all about the Second Amendment and self-defense, they treated her like a pariah. And
right. Yeah.
And so she thought, what if there were a way where we're just Second Amendment people could do that? I thought, I was talking to her. I said, Gail, it's a great idea. I know some people at the SAF. I bet you we could put this whole kind of thing together and maybe plug it in with GRPC. And she kind of let me run with it, and that's how the whole thing came together. What it is one day where we bring in media professionals and we talk about things that podcasters, bloggers, YouTube creators can do to make their Second Amendment media more effective. Everything from helping to monetize, helping to make sure your content is correct, and help with hardware and software and things. And it's a whole day of learning for Second Amendment media, and it's all free. The SAF even covered lunch last year, and we were able to get a long-term commitment from them. We're going to be continuing that annually going forward.
But yeah, that is because I often joke that if you a social media marketer, just start out in the gun, and when you're done, everything else will be easy. There's so many that we're blocked from doing, you know, podcasting groups on Facebook where you're not allowed to talk about firearms. So the people in there, you're not even allowed to. Yeah, that's. I think that's going to be really helpful for people out there.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. There's so many impediments. Not only is Facebook blatantly and admittedly anti-gun, YouTube has been screwing around with everything, and the cards are really stacked against us. Podcasters, we're in a bit of a different niche because as long as we pay for our bandwidth, there's nothing that anybody can do. So, but YouTube creators and social media have been coming up on some fantastic challenges, and that's one of the big things that we're going to be discussing this year. We've got 3 panels over the day that are going to be discussing those issues.
excellent, yeah, yeah. So, so you travel the country quite a bit, and do you observe as you travel like a noticeable change in people's attitude towards guns, or is it more subtle, or how subtle is it? So,
Yeah, my job is to my how I earn my living is by driving truck, and yeah, I do a little bit, not as blatantly as you would think, but there is a little bit of a change. When the coasts are a little bit flaky, but
okay.
I honestly though when I'm out of my home area, when I'm in the truck, I carry concealed. And when I say I'm concealed, I mean I'm really concealed in that I don't wear the pro gun. I don't wear the shoot me first vest. I don't wear pro gun shirts. I don't wear the Glock hat or the if you were to meet me on the street and not know me, you would never ever guess that I am armed. And so it's not like I mean, let's be honest. When I'm at home, 2/3 of my wardrobe is pro gun stuff because of what I do. And so if you were to meet me in or about my hometown of Sioux Falls, I mean, yeah, I get conversations all the time because I've got a lot of pro gun stuff on. But out in the rest of the world, I look at it as just your average Joe who has happened to be carrying a concealed firearm, and it's a bit of a mix, a bit of a more anti-gun sentiment as you get to the coasts, especially when you get to the southeast and the northeast and into the San Francisco, Sacramento area of California. Everywhere else, honestly, I don't think firearms are the front of mind thing for about 70% of the population. The news media would like everybody to freak out about it, but I think everybody is just trying to make their own life, stay on track, and that's kind of not right in the forefront of their minds.
Yeah, and that is something I've sort of observed. Our circle that's very the anti-gun circle that's out there, but the most of the world is just sort of in the middle, and it's not that they don't care about rights or other things on their mind, and that's something that frightens me. Is that if you aren't diligent, you just get that barrage of anti-gun, the gun in the media, and like I'm watching a show on Netflix, and I'm like, well, remark. That was an anti-gun remark. That was and I'm thinking that everyday people probably aren't picking up on that, and you know, it's important that we have podcasts on. I don't know what advice would you give to the pro gun community about spreading that word and combating that anti-gun message that's out there to the middle, so to speak.
Well, I think the best thing to do is something I just finished up earlier today. Take new people shooting. When I get home, what I very commonly do is I will have what I call an open shoot, a new shooter's shoot. I invite absolutely anybody and everybody I know, and tell them, look, I'm going out to the range. If you are a new shooter, I'll make sure you have a safe experience. If you've never shot a gun, or if you haven't shot in 30 years or whatever, come on out. We'll provide the guns. We'll provide the ammo. Matt Shinzing you're going to have to edit this. I'm sorry. Matt Martin of the Geeks, Gadgets, and Guns podcast comes out with me, and we have all kinds of different variety of handguns, all kinds of different variety of rifles and shotguns, and whatever people want to experience, we help them out. And starting from 22s and little 410 shotguns, and but we introduce people to firearms safely, and it never ever fails when they realize it's not as difficult as they think it was, and they're able to actually hit a target. The grin comes out, and then you got them. And the thing is, we never ever talk politics, period. It's outlawed. All we want to do is get them in the door. All we want to do is get them in the door. Generally, people are smart enough to figure it out on their own, but you got to make them interested, and the only way to get them interested is to show them that this is safe, it's fun, and you can be effective in defending yourself if you choose.
That is a really important message, and it's become a theme. Almost everyone I've interviewed so far has given that, some version of that advice. Great. So, what are the things? Asking all my guests, are there books out there that you would recommend every gun owner or every?
Yeah, there are a couple books, and I would recommend you reach out to Andy Brown to be on your show. Andy Brown wrote Warnings Unheeded, Twin Tragedies at Fairchild Air Force Base. It is a book that details. Andy Brown was a young MP, military police officer, and he was the one that stopped the shooter at Fairchild Air Force Base when a raging lunatic shot up the base hospital, and he was the one that actually stopped him. And it's a book detailing in depth the shooter's history and what went wrong, and the many warning signs that it was exhibited by this shooter leading up to the tragedy. It doesn't just. He could have wrote 2 chapters and about the shooting, but he went so much. He went so in depth in his research, and researched this man all the way back to junior high school, and really got in depth. And he does talk about the shooting itself and how he stopped it with an amazing shot with a handgun from, I believe, was 66 yards away. But anyway, that's one book that I very, very, very strongly recommend. Another one, and if any of your listeners are Christians, one that I very strongly recommend, and I'm holding in my hands right now, A Time to Kill, The Myth of Christian Pacifism by Greg Hopkins, is a very, very good book. You quite often hear, well, Jesus said turn the other cheek. Well, yes, he did. However, that's not all he said. And Greg gets into great, and he'd be another great interview for you. He gets into great detail about that into his book.
Great, thank you. So where should people online websites?
Well, the easiest place to go look, if you're looking for Polite Society Podcast, is just simply go to politesocietypodcast.com. That is the website that houses our show. However, you can also go to selfdefenseradio.net. That way, not only do you get our show, and in every episode of our show gets put in there when you click on our tab, but you can, all the other shows on the network, you can click on their tab, you can listen to their shows or get subscription information right from there too.
Thank you. Uh, any anything else you'd like to add for our listeners?
I just, it's an honor for you to ask me to. It's not often. I arrange interviews and I interview people all the time, and I'm very, very used to that part of podcasting. To be asked to be on another person's show, that's a great honor, and I want to thank you for that.
Oh, I'm honored to have you on. Yeah, thank you for coming.
You bet.
Uh, well, Out of Order listeners, thank you for tuning in to episode 3. Please head over to the show notes page, outoforderjameskalita.com/3, and they'll have links there to all of Paul's organizations, uh, the podcast, the convention, the Self Defense Radio Network, and also the books that we talked about. And you'll be able to check out those offers from Liberty Maniacs and Liberty Classroom. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.